My daughter-in-law had just left for the store when my 7-year-old grandson whispered, "We have to get out of here, right now." I laughed. "Why?" The boy pointed upstairs, trembling. I saw a man climbing through the window and getting into Mom's room. I immediately grabbed the car keys and drove straight to the police station. And then, everything happened. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of vengeance from. I want to know how far it's reached. I woke up early in the morning when the first rays of sun were filtering through the old fabric curtains in the small kitchen. This wooden house in rural New England has been a witness to so many joys and sorrows in my family. But now only the footsteps of 3 people echo within it. Mine, those of my daughter-in-law, Sarah, and those of my grandson, Ethan. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mixing with the chirping of birds in the backyard. I smiled, thinking that no matter how much life changes, peaceful moments like this always deserve to be cherished. Ethan, my 7-year-old grandson, was still curled up in the blankets upstairs, sleeping soundly like a kitten. That child is my only comfort since my son, Andrew, left forever in a traffic accident 3 years ago. Before that, my husband had also left me, a victim of a sudden stroke. The 2 men in my life, the ones I loved the most, abandoned me in this house, leaving a void I never thought I could fill. But I still have Ethan, that little light on my darkest days. I had just set a plate of hot pancakes on the table when I heard soft footsteps coming down the wooden stairs. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, descended wearing a light gray sweater and her dark hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She smiled, but her smile was as fleeting as a blast of cold air. "Mom, I'm going to the convenience store to buy milk and detergent," she said in a somewhat rushed tone, as if trying to hide something. I nodded, watching her sling the cloth bag over her shoulder. "Put on a jacket, it's still cold outside," I warned her, purely out of motherly habit. Sarah nodded slightly, without turning around, and quickly went out the door. As soon as the door closed, the house fell into an odd silence. You couldn't hear the birds anymore, or the wind. Only the ticking of the wall clock, marking the seconds as if counting down to something that was about to happen. I sat down with the still steaming cup of coffee in my hand, trying to dispel the feeling of unease that was seeping into my chest. Maybe I was being too suspicious. Sarah had always been a good daughter-in-law, though sometimes I felt her to be distant, as if an invisible wall existed between us. But I told myself maybe it was just because I missed Andrew too much, and that's why everything seemed different to me now. Lost in my thoughts, I was startled by the sound of bare feet running down the wooden stairs. Ethan flew down like an arrow, his face pale and his eyes wide open, filled with terror. "Grandma! Grandma! We have to get out of here. Right now!" the boy gasped, his voice trembling and his hands clutching the edge of the table, as if he feared falling. I smiled gently, thinking he must have had a nightmare. Children at that age often imagine things. "Go where, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice sweet to calm him down. But Ethan didn't smile. He pointed upward, his body shaking. I saw a strange man get into Mom's room. "Through that window, Grandma." His words pierced my heart like a dagger. The coffee in my hand suddenly turned cold. I jumped up, my heart pounding violently, about to burst in my chest. "What did you say? Did you see him clearly?" I asked, my voice choked. Ethan nodded quickly, his eyes full of tears. "I saw him. He was wearing a black jacket. He came in through the window. I got really scared and ran downstairs." Without thinking anymore, I took Ethan's hand and led him upstairs. His small hand was icy, clinging to mine as if he feared I would abandon him. Sarah's room door was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. I pushed the door open and entered. My heart was beating so loudly I could hear the pulse in my ears. The window curtain was ripped in one corner, hanging like a warning. On the wooden floor were still damp mud stains, as if someone had left them after last night's rain. I walked over to the window and opened it wide. The outside security bars were bent forcefully, as if someone had violently broken them. I looked down at the small backyard. There were tracks from a man's shoes marked in the soft earth, leading from the wall to the fence. Ethan pressed against me and whispered, "I told you, someone came in here." His voice trembled, but it sounded firm, as if he had seen something so terrible he could never forget it. I closed the curtains, trying to stay calm, but inside, everything was collapsing. "Yes, my boy," I murmured, stroking his hair. "Don't tell your mom any of this." I didn't want to worry Ethan more, but even I didn't know what to do. A strange man in Sarah's room? Why? And why didn't she seem to know it? Or did she? That idea made me shudder. I went downstairs to the kitchen with Ethan, turned on the old radio, and turned up the volume so the country music filled the house, covering the unsettling silence around us. But even those cheerful songs couldn't chase away the feeling of fear in my chest. Outside, the neighbor's dog started barking furiously, looking toward the fence where the footprints were. His barks broke the air, making me drop the spoon in my hand. I looked toward the backyard, but didn't see anything, only the shadows of the trees moving in the wind. "It's just the dog," I told myself, but my hands trembled as I picked up the spoon from the floor. When Sarah returned, she dropped the bags on the table, a few cartons of milk and a package of detergent rolled out. "Mom, why was my window open?" she asked in a calm tone, as if nothing were wrong. I looked at her, searching for some sign on her beautiful face, but only found her usual smile. "It must have been the wind, dear," I replied, feigning confusion, though inside everything was chaos. Sarah smiled, but her gaze briefly shifted upstairs and then came back to me with a quick gesture, as if she were watching me. That smile chilled my blood. I couldn't eat a bite during breakfast. The pancakes in front of me grew cold, and the coffee lost its aroma. Ethan remained quiet next to me, his eyes fixed on his plate, chewing in silence. I knew he was scared too, but he understood, like me, that some things were better left unsaid. I stroked his head and tried to smile to reassure him, although my smile must have looked forced and sad. While I was doing the dishes, I heard Sarah's low voice talking on the phone in the living room. "It's fine. I'll see you tomorrow." "Don't call this number again," she said in a soft but cold, authoritative voice. I looked up and peeked through the crack in the door. Sarah was standing, phone in hand, her loose hair covering part of her face. When she put the cell phone in her purse, her lips curved into a strange smile, not of joy, but a calculated one, as if she had just completed another step in a secret plan. My heart raced, but I didn't dare ask her anything. I feared that if I did, I would break something fragile that was still holding our family together. I went back to the sink, trying to focus on washing the dishes, but my mind was a mess. Something had silently broken in this house, an invisible crack that I didn't yet understand, but that I knew was spreading, like the fissures in the old wall I tried to repair after every rainy season. I looked up at the wooden shelf in the living room, where a photo taken a few years ago rested. My husband, Andrew, Sarah, and I, all smiling happily under the golden light of a summer afternoon. My husband, with his kind smile, had passed away from a stroke, right there on the old living room sofa. Andrew, my pride, had also left me a short time later, in an accident that I still find hard to believe was real. Now, in this house, there were only Sarah, Ethan, and me, that small grandson who, unknowingly, saved my life with a warning. The days after that terrifying morning, I started to notice that Sarah had changed. She lived in a rush, as if she were racing against time. Every night she would leave the house, saying she was going to a charity meeting at the First Baptist Church. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside, her words no longer held any weight. Sarah had been an attentive daughter-in-law, always helping me clean, cook, and take care of Ethan. But now, I felt she was a stranger, living under my roof, someone I could no longer understand. Every time she went out, Sarah would spray herself with a strong, sweet, spicy perfume, very different from the smell of the lavender soap she used before. That scent would linger in the air, making me feel suffocated every time I passed her room. I tried to convince myself that maybe she just wanted to refresh herself, to start anew after so many losses. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. It was that feeling you get when you see an old wall with small cracks starting to spread, without yet knowing where they'll lead. One afternoon, when Sarah said she had to go out to buy things for the charity group, I decided to go up to her room to clean. It wasn't my intention to invade her privacy, but I needed answers. The room was strangely clean, without a speck of dust, as if Sarah had wanted to erase every trace. But the closet door was ajar, just a little, like a tempting invitation. I hesitated, my hand on the door, my heart pounding violently. What am I doing? I asked myself. But I opened the closet anyway. In the third drawer, under a pile of carefully folded dresses, I found a small dark blue cloth bag, one of those people use to keep important things. My hands trembled as I untied the string. Inside, there was a crumpled receipt from a hotel in Atlantic City and a photo torn in half. On the remaining part, I saw Sarah's hand, those slender, familiar fingers clasping a man's hand. On his wrist, a gold watch glittered, shining under the light. I felt my heart stop. The name of the hotel on the receipt, the Crescent Moon Inn, sounded familiar. Then I remembered. It was the place near the motel that burned down in a suspicious fire last year. The newspapers talked about it, but the case was soon forgotten. I stood there, in the middle of Sarah's room, feeling the floor sinking beneath my feet. I took out my phone, quickly took pictures of the things inside the cloth bag, and then put them back carefully as they were. My heart was pounding, but I tried to stay calm. If Sarah discovered I had searched her things, I didn't know what might happen. As I left the room, I had to lean on the doorknob to keep from falling. My head was spinning with hundreds of unanswered questions. That night, when Sarah returned, she was still smiling as always, but that smile now gave me the chills. I feigned casualness and asked as she passed, "Where did you go yesterday, Sarah? Did you go out of state?" She paused for a second. The hand pouring the water froze, and then she smiled. "Mom, I went with the church volunteer group. We went to visit an orphanage on the outskirts, that's all." Her voice was soft, natural, but her gaze avoided mine, as if she didn't dare look at me directly. I nodded, pretending to be satisfied with her answer, but inside I knew she was lying. The next morning, while I was sweeping the patio, my neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, shouted to me from the fence. "Sarah is looking very dressed up lately, Mary. Looks like she's going on a date." She let out a laugh, in a joking tone, but her words were like a dagger in my chest. I smiled awkwardly and replied, "Young people, you know, who understands them?" But when I returned to the broom, a chill ran down my entire body. A date? With whom? And why would she have to hide it from me? I started noticing the small details. Sarah now locked her room every time she was inside, something she had never done before. Once I knocked on the door to tell her that Ethan had a slight fever and to come down to see him. She answered from inside, "I'm coming, Mom." But when she opened the door, a strong perfume scent hit me, and on her phone screen, I managed to see the words, "Call from G," before she quickly turned it off. I pretended not to have seen anything, and only said, "Ethan is in the kitchen. Check on him, please." But inside, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Another morning, while I was making coffee, Ethan approached stealthily and whispered to me, "Grandma, last night I saw Mom go out in a black dress, when it was already very dark." His large eyes reflected concern, as if he understood that something wasn't right. I stroked his head, trying to keep my voice calm. "Keep quiet, son. Don't say anything to Mom." But inside me, the fear was starting to grow, like a storm forming in the distance. That evening, while I was folding laundry in the living room, Sarah came in with her sweet face, as if nothing had happened. She placed a hot cup of chamomile tea on the table. The aroma filled the room. "Drink this, Mom, so you'll sleep well," she said in a voice as sweet as honey. I thanked her and smiled, but when she turned around, I barely wet my lips. Something wasn't right. I tilted the cup and carefully observed the golden liquid. A thin, undissolved layer of white powder rested at the bottom, shining under the light. My heart raced. That wasn't ordinary chamomile tea. I took the cup to the bathroom and emptied it into the sink. The sound of the water mixing with the bitter smell of medicine made me shudder. I clenched my fists and told myself, I must know what she's hiding. The feeling of betrayal burned in my chest, but I held it back. Sarah had been like a daughter to me, the woman who cried with me next to Andrew's coffin. But now, I was no longer sure who she really was. The next day, I decided to follow Sarah. At 6 o'clock in the evening, she left the house with the same excuse as always. "I'm going to Mass at the First Baptist Church, Mom." I nodded, smiled, but as soon as she was out of sight, I sent Ethan to Mrs. Reynolds' house to watch him for a while. "Be a good boy, my love. Play with Mrs. Reynolds. Grandma is going out for a moment," I told him, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. Then I put on my jacket, my old cloth hat, and walked silently behind Sarah, keeping enough distance not to be discovered. She didn't turn toward the church as I thought. Instead, she continued straight toward the highway, with firm steps, as if she knew the way very well. I followed her, My heart was pounding, and my tired legs could barely keep up. Finally, Sarah stopped in front of a small diner, on the side of the road, the yellow interior light shining through the glass. I hid behind a tree, breathing with difficulty. Inside, a tall man, wearing a white shirt, was waiting for her. On his wrist, a gold watch glittered, identical to the one in the photo I had found. Sarah went in and sat across from him. They held hands, whispering things in each other's ears. Then he leaned in and kissed her passionately, as if the whole world had disappeared. I stood there, in the shadow of the tree, feeling the ground sinking beneath my feet. My hands trembled as I raised my old phone and took a photo through the glass. Then, I walked away in silence. On the way back home, I could no longer feel my legs. There was only pain and confusion, mixed together like a wave dragging me under. Sarah, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter, was cheating on me. And that man? Who was he? Could he be the same one who entered her room the other night, as Ethan said? I couldn't sleep that night. In my head, the image of Sarah laughing with that man repeated over and over, along with Ethan's warning. Grandma. Someone came into Mom's room. I lay there looking at the ceiling, where the old cracks were still there, like a reminder of everything that was breaking in this family. I knew that from that night on, I could no longer consider Sarah my daughter-in-law. She had crossed a line I couldn't forgive. The next morning, I got up early, as always, dragging my feet to the kitchen. The house was still silent. Only the ticking of the clock and the whistling of the wind slipping through the window could be heard. I made coffee, trying not to let my hands tremble, but every time I thought about the photo and the receipt tucked into Sarah's cloth bag, my heart hammered against my chest. I no longer saw this house as a safe place. Now it seemed like a trap, and I was in the middle of the line between life and death. Ethan was still asleep upstairs. The boy's soft snoring was the only thing that gave me a little family warmth. I stood by the stove, looking at the steaming coffee, with no desire to taste it. Through the window, I saw Sarah on the porch, phone in hand, talking to someone. Her voice was low, but I managed to hear a few words. "It's fine, I'll check it again. Nobody suspects anything." She smiled slightly, a cold smile. She hung up and came into the house as if nothing had happened. I turned around, pretending to be busy with the dishes, but inside me, the storm of distrust had already begun. I tried to stay calm, doing daily chores like cleaning the living room to dispel the fear that was pressing on my chest. But then, as I dusted under the sofa, my hand stopped. A crumpled piece of paper lay alone on the floor, as if someone had dropped it by accident. I picked it up, opened it, and felt my heart stop. It was a photocopy of an insurance contract. The name of the original beneficiary was carelessly crossed out, and in its place was a name written by hand, shaky, Sarah Miller. I sat down on the floor, my hands on my chest, feeling the air in the room had vanished. That contract, I remembered it perfectly, was something Andrew, my son, had bought for me right after my husband died. "Mom, let me take care of you," he had told me with a voice full of affection. Since the day Andrew died, I never touched any document related to it. I put the paper in my pocket, trying to keep my breathing steady. That midday, while Sarah was in the kitchen preparing lunch, her phone on the table lit up. I glanced at it and saw a message from an unknown number, saved as G. "The beneficiary name on that old woman's insurance contract is already changed to your name. Nobody suspects anything." I felt my blood run cold. I wanted to scream, run to the kitchen, and confront Sarah immediately, but I held myself back. If she knew that I had discovered something, I wasn't sure what might happen. I only walked away from the room in silence, telling myself I had to act fast. Without hesitation, I called a cab. I put the paper in my purse and turned to Ethan, who was playing with his toy truck in the living room. "Grandma's going out for a while. Stay home with Mom, okay?" I told him, trying to sound natural. The boy nodded, but his gaze made me think he wanted to ask me something. I stroked his head, smiled, and left the house with a heavy heart. I arrived at the Starpoint Insurance office, a 2-story yellow building, somewhat old, in downtown Cleveland. The smell of old paper and the hum of the air conditioning made the atmosphere more stifling. A young employee, wearing glasses, greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning. You're Mrs. Mary Roberts, right?" "Yes. Your file has already been updated." I frowned and asked in a hoarse voice, "Updated in what sense?" The young man typed for a moment and then read aloud, as if it were a routine report. Life insurance beneficiary, Sarah Miller. Ownership of the family auto repair shop has also been transferred. The fire insurance value for the shop was doubled last month. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. Who did all that? I asked, my voice trembling. The employee replied with complete casualness. Your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Sarah. She brought a notarized power of attorney signed by you, saying you were busy and had asked her to do the paperwork in your place. I could barely breathe. Did she say anything else? I asked, trying to keep calm. He nodded. She said the family was about to remodel and expand the shop, so they needed to increase the insurance. Everything is in order, ma'am. I asked to see a copy of the supposed power of attorney. The young man printed a sheet and handed it to me. At the bottom was my signature, or rather, an attempt to imitate it. The letters were twisted, shaky. It wasn't my signature. I had never signed anything like it. I squeezed the paper tightly and asked, almost in a whisper, if the insured person dies, the beneficiary receives all the money, right? He nodded. That's right. The payment is made to the sole beneficiary. My throat closed up, as if someone were squeezing it. I asked for a copy of all the documents and left the office, walking like a sleepwalker. On the way home, I happened to pass in front of the diner where I had seen Sarah with the man the night before. Her car was parked outside. The windows steamed up from the moisture. I hid behind a lamppost, my heart pounding hard. Through the glass, I saw Sarah sitting across from a man with dark glasses, looking mysterious. They exchanged a thick envelope. When the man left, Sarah opened the envelope, took out a sheet, smiled, and kissed it softly, as if it were a trophy. I stood there, under the blazing Ohio sun, but my body was frozen. I no longer had any doubts. Sarah was not only cheating on me, but she was planning something much worse. I returned home with my mind a mess, but tried to keep a calm expression so as not to alert her. That night, Sarah arrived cheerful, as if nothing had happened, and brought me a cup of chamomile tea. Drink it, Mom. You'll sleep better, she said in a voice as sweet as honey. I smiled as I accepted it, but when she turned around, I poured the tea directly onto the cactus plant next to the window. The next morning, the plant was withered, the leaves yellow, like a living warning. I sat by the window, looking at the slowly dying plant. My heart shattered. Sarah, the daughter-in-law I once loved so much, with whom I shared the pain of losing Andrew, was now trying to poison me. I couldn't believe she was capable of changing so much, or maybe I had never truly known her. But what terrified me most wasn't the tea or the insurance policy, but the question, who was that man in the shadows, and what did they want from me? The next morning, I put on my jacket and crossed the alley that led to Mrs. Reynolds' house, clutching the small piece of paper with the strange phone number I had seen in Sarah's message. I knocked on the door, and she opened it almost immediately, as if she already knew I was coming. Mary, come in, you look very pale, she said, leading me into the small living room smelling of freshly baked apple pie. I handed her the paper, my voice trembling. Reynolds, can you help me find out about this number? I think Sarah is involved in something very dangerous. She narrowed her eyes, and a mischievous smile appeared on her wrinkled face. Mary, you came to the right person. I was a police investigator for 20 years. Don't underestimate this old woman. She took out a worn, leather-bound notebook, flipped through a few pages, and dialed the number on the smartphone her son had given her. A while later, she looked up with a serious expression. This number is registered to a Gabriel Sterling. He worked for an insurance company out west. But listen closely, Mary. He was involved in a fake fire at a motel in Las Vegas. He pocketed more than $500,000 in compensation. I felt as if I'd been punched in the chest. Was he arrested? I asked, my voice broken. Reynolds shook her head, with a look full of concern. No, he has someone powerful behind him. The case was buried, and he disappeared from Las Vegas. She paused, looked at me intently, and lowered her voice. Mary, you must be very careful. If Sarah is associating with these kinds of people, it's no longer about a simple infidelity. It's a professional scam, and they won't hesitate to harm you just to get your money. She took an old map of Las Vegas out of a drawer, opened it on the table, and pointed to a spot marked in red. The hotel on the receipt you photographed, the Crescent Moon Inn, was exactly where that fire occurred. I was petrified, as if all the loose pieces had suddenly clicked into place. The hotel receipt, The message about the insurance policy, the man with the gold watch. Everything was connected, and I was in the eye of the storm. "Thank you, Reynolds," I whispered, trying to hold back the tears. "I have a contact on the police force," she added. "I'm going to ask for more information. And you, stay home and look after Ethan. Don't go out alone." I returned home with my heart tied in a knot. Ethan was sitting on the living room floor, playing with his toy truck, humming a nursery rhyme. Seeing me, the boy looked up with clear eyes. "Grandma, my mom said next week she's going to take me to Grandma's house." I froze, my heart racing. "But your grandma died a long time ago," I replied in a low voice, trying to stay calm. Ethan lowered his head in a small voice. "I said that too, but Mom said she came back to life." The boy's innocent phrase was like a stab in the chest. It was clear that Sarah was planning to escape, and she wanted to take Ethan so no one would suspect. I hugged my grandson tightly and whispered, "Don't worry, my love. I won't let them take you away." That afternoon, I saw Sarah secretly moving things to the trunk of the car. Some small suitcases, a box of documents, and a bulging cloth bag that looked full of bills. She did everything very quickly, as if she were afraid of being discovered. I stayed at a distance, pretending to water the plants, and asked casually, "Sarah, what are you packing so much of?" She started and smiled apologetically. "Oh, I'm just collecting old things I don't use. I'm going to take them to charity, Mom." But through the crack of the trunk lid, I managed to see the label Star Point Insurance on a file. Her smile couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, where the old cracks were still there, like a reminder of what was breaking in this family. Through the window, I saw a car light project onto the wall and then disappear at the end of the street. The neighbors' dogs barked, loud and prolonged, as if warning of something. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing, but I didn't dare go out to investigate. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Reynolds. "I found out, Mary," she said in a tense voice. "Gabriel Sterling is in Cleveland, renting a room in East Side, less than 2 blocks from your house's auto shop." I felt my blood run cold. He was so close to being outside my door at any moment. Before hanging up, Reynolds warned, "Be careful, Mary. Don't let him see that you suspect anything." I had just hung up when I heard voices in the backyard. The door leading outside was ajar, and I recognized Sarah's voice, low but sharp. I approached stealthily, hiding behind the wall. A man's voice sounded over the phone. "We'll do it Friday night, when she's sound asleep. A small spark is all it takes." Sarah's voice replied, cold as ice. "I want everything to be safe. We can't allow her any chance of surviving." I backed away, my heart about to explode. I ran to my room. I locked the door, and my hands were trembling so much that I dropped the keychain on the floor. That night, it was pouring rain. The thunder rumbled and startled me. I pulled back the curtains. I looked outside, and my heart almost stopped beating. Under the faint lamppost light, a man in a cap was there, staring intently at me from outside the house. I couldn't see his face well, but the gold watch on his wrist shone under the light, like a deadly warning. I quickly closed the curtain, crouched down on the floor, and hugged my knees. Fear pressed on my chest, but I knew I couldn't let it defeat me. I had to protect Ethan and protect myself. The next morning, I decided I had to act before they made their move. I sat at the table, took a sheet of paper, and wrote a short letter. My hand was trembling so much that the writing was crooked. Just one line: "If anything happens to me, look for Gabriel Sterling and Sarah Miller. They are the guilty ones." I folded the letter and put it in my notebook in case something happened. In the early morning, when the sky was still dark and the rain was hitting the roof, I was awakened by a soft noise on the wooden staircase. My heart was pounding, as if I had a premonition of something bad. I stayed still, holding my breath, and looked through the crack in the door. Sarah's figure slipped past. She was wearing a hooded jacket, a small cloth bag in her hand, her steps light but hurried, as if she were afraid of being seen. "Mom, I'm going to the church to see the pastor for a moment, to talk about the Mass in Andrew's memory. I'll be back late," she said, her voice monotone, but without the sincerity I was used to. I replied, "Yes," forcing myself to hide the tremor in my voice, as if everything were normal. But when the front door slammed shut and I heard the click of the lock, I jumped up. All my senses told me, this is the last chance to act. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't allow Sarah and that man named Gabriel to advance one step further in their plan. I quickly went to the living room, where the car keys hung from the wooden hook by the door. With trembling hands, I grabbed them. The cold metal gave me even more determination. I ran to Ethan's room. My heart was beating so hard, it felt like it would explode. The boy was curled up under the blanket, eyes closed, his innocent little face unaware of what was happening. "Get up, Ethan, fast," I whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. Ethan rubbed his eyes, still drowsy, and said in a small voice, "Grandma, where are we going?" I knelt by the bed, trying to keep my voice soft so as not to scare him. "Somewhere safe. Trust me, okay?" The boy nodded, although he still looked confused. I quickly grabbed some of Ethan's clothes, put them in a plastic bag, added a bottle, and the superhero comic book he loves. Every item I took reminded me, I have to protect this child, no matter the cost. Outside, it was pouring rain, heavy drops hitting the roof and the ground, forming puddles everywhere. I turned off all the lights in the house, leaving only a small nightlight in the living room, a dim light that cast shadows on the wall. If Sarah came back, I wanted her to believe we were still sound asleep, unsuspecting. I took Ethan out to the car, holding him close to shield him from the rain. "Grandma, it's cold." He snuggled against my jacket, his voice trembling. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Just a moment, honey. I'll keep you warm." I sat in the driver's seat and started the engine. The old engine made a hoarse sound, as if it too were complaining about this night of rain and wind. I drove out of the alley toward downtown Cleveland. The road was slippery, the yellow light of the lampposts reflecting on the wet asphalt like pieces of broken mirrors. Ethan was in the back seat, hugging his teddy bear, his big eyes looking out the window. "Is my mom going to find us today?" he asked, in a small voice, but full of worry. I squeezed the steering wheel tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, son, I won't let your mother find us." But inside, I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. The rain worsened, visibility hindered by streams of water on the windshield. A large truck sped past and splashed the glass, blurring it. I had to drive very slowly, my hands clenched on the steering wheel until they hurt. In my head, the image of Sarah handing an envelope to the man in dark glasses, and her cold voice talking about a small flame, repeated. Like a ghostly song I couldn't get out of my head. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Ethan hugging his stuffed animal, his eyes sad. The boy was all I had left, and I couldn't lose him. When I arrived in downtown Cleveland, I stopped the car in front of the local police precinct, a low building with cold fluorescent lights. The rain soaked my clothes. My hair was plastered down, but I didn't care. I took Ethan by the hand and dragged him inside, my other hand clutching the now drenched folder of documents. The officer on duty, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, looked up from his desk. "What do you need at this hour?" he asked, in a somewhat surprised tone. Trembling, I tried not to lose my voice. "I need to see the commanding officer. Please, help me." A while later, a woman came out of the hallway. She had her hair pulled back in a bun and a sharp gaze, as if she could see right through everything. "I'm Lieutenant Valeria Cruz," she introduced herself, in a calm voice but full of authority. "What's the emergency, ma'am?" I handed her the soaked papers. Printed copies of the hotel receipt, the forged insurance contract, Gabriel's messages, and also a photo of the withered cactus plant from the cup of poisoned tea. "My daughter-in-law wants to harm me to get the insurance money," I said, my voice cracking, tears flowing uncontrollably. Valeria quickly flipped through the pages. "Your story sounds incredible, but the evidence doesn't lie," she said in a serious tone. "Ma'am, do you have a safe place to stay?" I shook my head, feeling completely helpless. Valeria signaled a young officer to bring a dry towel and a cup of warm milk for Ethan, and then led me to a corner. "If she's really planning to do something, the only way is to make her believe you no longer exist," she said in a low voice, her eyes resolute. I was stunned. "What do you mean?" Valeria explained confidently. "We're going to help you fake your death. She's not only planning to burn down your shop, but she wants to kill you to benefit from the life insurance. If that's the case, let's let her think luck is on her side, and we'll surprise her in the act when she and her accomplices make their move." I was silent for a few seconds. My head was spinning. The idea of faking my death sounded like a cruel joke, but I looked at Ethan, sitting in the corner with the cup of warm milk, his eyes sad. I had no other option. All right, I nodded decisively, although inside I was trembling. Valeria immediately wrote an urgent order to convene the investigation team. Tomorrow morning, they'll take you to the county hospital. We'll make a false report about a stroke case, she said, handing me a document. I signed tremblingly, feeling like I was staking my entire life. The phone in my pocket rang non-stop. All were calls and messages from Sarah. "Mom, where are you and Ethan? Why aren't you home?" I took a deep breath and replied with a short message. "I'm taking Ethan to a friend's house for a few days. Don't worry." I pressed send and then turned off the phone, feeling I had just cut the last tie that bound me to Sarah. As I left the precinct, the rain had stopped. The air was icy, but I took a deep breath, feeling I was regaining my right to live. That morning, just as dawn was breaking, the police escorted me to the Cleveland General Hospital. The atmosphere was still misty, and the cold seeped through my thin jacket. I walked with heavy steps, as if dragging an entire lifetime. Lieutenant Valeria walked beside me. Her gaze was sharp, but didn't hide her compassion. "Mrs. Mary, everything will be fine," she said, in a grave but firm voice. I nodded, but inside I wasn't sure I had the strength to get through this nightmare. The hospital was permeated with the smell of disinfectant and the hurried sound of nurses' footsteps. Valeria led me to a small room on the third floor, where a doctor had already been briefed by her. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes, who handed me a fake medical file. I read the lines. "Mrs. Mary Roberts, stroke, rushed in by a friend, passed away at 5:37 a.m. My signature was at the bottom of the page, like a seal of destiny. I touched the paper trembling, feeling like I was reading my own obituary. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, my voice broken. He only nodded and left the room, leaving me with Valeria and an unnamed fear. Meanwhile, Ethan was taken to a shelter for victims' families, a few blocks from the hospital. Valeria had arranged for a young officer named Anne to stay with the boy at all times. "He'll be safe, don't worry," Valeria said, as if reading the concern in my eyes. I could only nod, the image of Ethan hugging his teddy bear and his sad eyes fixed in my mind. "For the next 3 days, you cannot appear in public," Valeria warned sternly. "We will monitor all of Sarah's movements, rest and recover." I nodded, but deep down, I knew I couldn't rest. How could I be calm knowing that Sarah was out there, believing I had died? The news of Mrs. Mary Roberts' sudden death spread quickly through the neighborhood, like a wind sweeping through the alleys of Cleveland. Valeria took me to a small room inside the hospital where I was to hide. The room was cold, with only a single bed, a small table, and a window overlooking the gray sky. I sat there, looking through the crack in the curtain, imagining Sarah organizing a simple funeral at home. Valeria told me that she was playing her role as the bereaved perfectly, tears flowing, her voice choked when speaking with neighbors about the unexpected stroke that had taken my life. "She cries as if it were real," Valeria said over the phone with an ironic tone. "But don't worry, Mrs. Mary, we have her under surveillance." 3 days passed slowly, as if time stretched out to test my patience. I wasn't allowed to make calls or go out. I could only stay in that room, hugging the small photo of Andrew I had brought with me. Every time I looked at his smile, I felt my heart break. "Son, what is your mother doing?" I whispered, as tears fell silently. But then I reminded myself that I wasn't doing it just for me, but also for Ethan, the grandson Andrew had left me. On the third night, while I was trying to sleep on the hard bed, Valeria's phone rang. She called me from a surveillance car near my family's auto shop. "Mrs. Mary, Gabriel Sterling has shown up," she said in a rushed voice. "He's driving a black pickup truck. He has 2 gas cans and a bag of tools." I sat up abruptly, my heart pounding. Valeria invited me to get into the surveillance car to witness everything, although she insisted I had to remain absolutely silent. I put on my jacket and left the hospital in the darkness, with the feeling of walking into a nightmare. We sat in the surveillance car, parked in a dark alley not far from the shop. On the small screen in front of me, I could see Gabriel forcing the lock of the main gate. The light from his flashlight slid across the old wooden walls. The sound of the gas can cap being opened was heard clearly through the listening device, like a stab straight to the heart. "Is he going in?" Valeria murmured, her hand clutching the transmitter. I bit my lip, my hands shaking as I watched him start to spray the gasoline, the bright liquid streams running onto the floor. That was the shop my husband and Andrew had built with a lifetime of work, a place full of our family memories, and now it was about to be destroyed by the man I once called my son-in-law. Valeria signaled the police team to get ready to surround him, her eyes cold like those of a wild animal on the prowl. Suddenly, Gabriel took out his phone, and his voice sounded through the hidden microphone. "Everything is ready. When I light the fire, you'll be the sole heir." I clenched my fist so hard that my nails dug into my palm. Valeria put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Let's wait until he lights the fire." I nodded, although my whole body was trembling with rage and fear. Then, a small flame appeared in the darkness, like a firefly bringing a bad omen. Immediately, Valeria shouted into the transmitter, "Go in now!" The headlights of the police cars turned on in unison, lighting up the shop as if it were day. Sirens blared, drowning out the sound of the rain. Gabriel, in a panic, tried to flee, but tripped over a toolbox and was subdued instantly. I stayed in the car, my heart racing, watching them put out the small flame before it could spread. My family's shop was still intact, but my soul was in pieces. The police searched Gabriel and found his phone. Valeria showed me the screen. A message from Sarah that read, "Don't forget tonight's plan," accompanied by a photo of the forged insurance contract and an audio recording of their conversation in a motel. In the recording, Sarah's voice sounded icy. "As long as that old woman disappears, everything will be ours." Gabriel, handcuffed, shouted as he was led away, "It wasn't my fault! Sarah paid me. She wanted the money." I looked at him, feeling a mixture of relief and repulsion. He wasn't the mastermind behind everything, but he had chosen to side with the darkness. Valeria placed her hand on my shoulder and said in a soft voice, "You did very well, Mrs. Mary. Leave the rest to us." I nodded as tears began to roll down my cheeks. I wasn't crying out of fear, but because I knew that, in heaven, Andrew was probably watching, seeing how his elderly mother finally stood up to protect the only grandson he had left. I imagined my son's smile, the one I hadn't seen in so long, and that filled me with a mixture of pain and comfort. That night they took me back to the shelter, where Ethan was waiting for me. The boy was sleeping peacefully, curled up under the blanket, his teddy bear tossed to one side. I sat by the bed, watching his innocent face. I kissed him on the forehead and whispered, "All of this is about to end, my love." Deep down, I knew that peace hadn't fully returned yet, but at least justice had begun to speak. The next morning, as the first rays of sun filtered through the police station window, I still couldn't leave. The air in the waiting room was heavy, the smell of cold coffee and old papers mixed, making the atmosphere more suffocating. Lieutenant Valeria and her team were sitting around a large table, their eyes fixed on the computer screen, analyzing every detail of Gabriel's phone. A young officer, with short, neatly combed hair, approached me with a bottle of cold water. "Mrs. Mary, Mrs. Sarah, where is she now? We can't find her at the house," he asked in a worried voice. I shook my head, my throat dry. "I don't know," I replied in a hoarse voice. In reality, I was afraid to think about where Sarah might be or what she might be doing, now that the news of my death had spread throughout the neighborhood. Would she continue with her plan, or would she have already noticed that something didn't fit? Valeria connected Gabriel's phone to the computer, and a series of messages appeared on the big screen. The short but cold phrases made me shudder. "Let me know when you're done. The shop key is under the flower pot. Do it fast, so the neighbors don't suspect." Each message was like a stab, tearing apart the trust I once had in Sarah. Then Valeria opened an audio file, and her voice sounded clear, icy, and determined. "When you burn it, I want everything to be clean. Gabriel, don't leave any trace." I gripped the arms of the chair tightly. My chest hurt as if it were being squeezed. It was Sarah's voice, yes, but not the Sarah I knew. Not the sweet daughter-in-law who once held my hand at Andrew's funeral, crying with swollen eyes. The woman in that recording was a stranger, someone capable of reducing everything to ashes just to get what she wanted. Valeria instructed her team to save all the information and then turned to me, speaking calmly but firmly. "Mrs. Mary, we just received an alert. Sarah has returned to the house." Her eyes shone with determination. "It's time to arrest her." I nodded, though inside I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, or just an endless void. Valeria divided the group in two. One would go directly to my house with the arrest warrant, and the other would block the nearby streets to prevent Sarah from escaping. I stood up abruptly, my voice trembling. "Please, let me go with you." But Valeria shook her head and put her hand on my shoulder. "No, stay here. Let us handle it, Mrs. Mary. You've done enough." Setting to. I could only sit down, my gaze fixed on the wall clock. Every minute passed slowly like a century, and every tick was like a hammer blow to my heart. I imagined the scene of Sarah being arrested. I imagined her expression when she realized her plan had collapsed. But instead of feeling satisfaction, I only felt a deep sadness. Sarah had been part of my family. She called me Mom. We cared for Ethan together. How could we have come to this? An hour later, the door to the waiting room burst open. 2 police officers escorted a woman. Her hair was tangled, her jacket stained with mud, and her hands were cuffed behind her back. It was Sarah. She kept her head down, walking staggeringly, as if all her strength had been drained. But when she looked up and saw me sitting there, her eyes froze in terror. "Mom, you're still alive?" Her voice trembled, as if she had seen a ghost. I stood up, looked her straight in the eyes, and replied calmly, but with an icy voice, "Yes, I'm still alive, and I know everything." Sarah was silent. Tears ran down her cheeks. But in her gaze, I saw no remorse, only the extreme fear of someone who had just been unmasked. She dropped into the chair, sobbing. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted money. I just wanted a new life." Her words were like another knife stabbing my chest. "You already had a life," I replied in a low voice, my throat tight. "But you're the one who burned it down with your own hands." I looked away, unable to keep looking at those eyes that once made me believe she was part of my family. In the hallway, another police officer entered with a sealed evidence bag. Inside, there was a forged insurance contract, property transfer documents, and a stack of receipts from the Crescent Moon Inn Hotel. Valeria signed the report, speaking firmly. "Sarah Miller, you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and forgery of documents." As she was led away, Sarah turned to look at me. That look, half plea, half hatred, chilled my blood. I didn't say anything. I just watched her walk away, like a strange shadow disappearing from my life. Valeria turned to me, her voice softer. "We have all the evidence." Gabriel confessed everything. "They won't be able to escape." I nodded, but inside me remained a void impossible to fill. I had won, but the price was the destruction of everything I once called family. I thought of Andrew, of the days when we still laughed together, of how Sarah held my hand and promised to take care of Ethan. All of that was just the past now, smoke dissolving in the air. That night I returned to the shelter home, where Ethan was waiting for me. The boy ran to hug me, asking in an innocent voice, "Grandma, where is my mom?" I sat down, hugged him, and replied gently, "Your mom had to go far away, honey, very far away." Ethan didn't ask anymore. He just snuggled against me, as if he could feel the pain in my chest. He fell asleep in my arms. His quiet breathing was a small comfort in the middle of the storm. I looked at him, not knowing whether to be happy for having protected him or to cry for everything lost. Outside, the police sirens faded away, mixing with the constant sound of the rain on the roof. I stayed there, in the darkness, thinking about the fire that Gabriel had tried to start in the family shop. That fire never got to burn, but it consumed Sarah's plans, and everything I once believed was my family. The next morning, I stood in front of the local county courthouse in downtown Cleveland. The courtroom was painted white, cold, with rows of old wooden benches and a smell of ancient papers mixed with cold coffee. I walked in, my legs trembling, but I repeated to myself that I had to be strong, not for me, but for Ethan, for Andrew, and for the very justice I had fought to reclaim. Lieutenant Valeria was already waiting for me outside the room. She leaned close to my ear in a grave but firm voice. "We're going to present the recording. You just have to confirm that it's Sarah's voice and recount exactly what happened." I nodded, clutching the small cloth bag in my hands, where I kept the old photo of Andrew and Sarah, a memory that was once a symbol of family happiness and was now only pain. "I'm ready," I replied, although my voice didn't hide the tremor. Inside the courtroom, the air felt thick, as if all eyes were on me. They directed me to sit in the witness stand, across from Sarah. She wore the gray prisoner's uniform, her black hair matted, her face haggard and pale, with no trace of the pretty daughter-in-law who used to smile at me on warm afternoons. She kept her head down, avoiding my gaze and the truth that was about to be revealed. When the prosecutor turned on the audio file, Sarah's cold voice resonated in the silence of the room. "When you burn it, I want everything to be clean. Gabriel, don't leave any trace." Those words, although I had already heard them, made me shudder. A murmur ran through the room, whispers spreading like waves in the water. I looked at Sarah, saw her biting her lip and clenching her hands inside the handcuffs. The prosecutor turned to me, his voice clear. "Mrs. Mary Roberts, do you confirm that this is the voice of the accused, Sarah Miller?" I stood up, holding the old photo of Andrew and Sarah. My voice sounded slow but firm. "It is her, the one who lived with my son for 7 years, the one who called me Mom, and then planned to harm me to get the insurance money." I held up the photo so everyone could see the happy smiles of those past days. She was part of my family, but she chose to betray everything. The room fell into absolute silence. Only the rustling of papers and the hum of the air conditioning on the ceiling could be heard. Sarah's lawyer stood up, trying to defend her in a soft voice. "Your Honor, my client suffered great financial pressure after her husband's death. She acted in a moment of desperation, with no real intention to cause harm." I could no longer contain myself. My voice hardened, cutting off his words. "Desperation to prepare forged contracts, plan to burn the shop, and poison me several times." I looked him straight in the eyes, and then at Sarah. She knew perfectly well what she was doing, and she chose to do it. Sarah burst into tears, her voice broken. I lost everything. I really didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted money to start over." Those words, instead of softening me, only hurt me more. I replied in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "No one can rebuild their life on the pain and lives of others." I sat down, feeling like I was releasing a heavy weight, but at the same time, a cold emptiness expanded in my chest. At that moment, the courtroom door burst open. Gabriel was let in, looking disheveled and his eyes bloodshot. Seeing Sarah, he immediately avoided her gaze, as if he feared being dragged down by the storm he himself had helped create. The prosecutor asked, "Mr. Sterling, do you have anything to say about your role in this matter?" Gabriel lowered his head, his voice trembling. "I only did what she ordered me to. She promised me she would give me part of the insurance money." He pointed at Sarah bitterly. "She was the one who planned everything." The prosecutor presented all the evidence, the messages between the two, the records of bank transfers from Sarah to an account in Gabriel's name, and also the audio recording from his phone. Every piece of evidence was like a stone thrown against the wall of lies that Sarah and Gabriel had built, causing it to crumble piece by piece. The judge, an older man with a severe gaze, struck the gavel. "Both defendants will remain in pretrial detention until the official trial date. Today's session is adjourned." As I left the room, the morning sunlight streamed through the windows, so intense that it made my eyes burn. I stood still, breathing deeply, feeling that I had just let go of a part of the weight I had carried on my shoulders all those days. Valeria approached, patted me on the shoulder. "You did very well, Mrs. Mary," she said respectfully. "Without you, this case might have been buried like so many others." I smiled weakly, but inside I didn't feel victory, only a deep sadness, as if I had just lost a part of the happy memories with Sarah and Andrew. When I returned to the foster home, Ethan was playing in the yard, rolling his toy truck over the dirt. Seeing me, he ran toward me and hugged my legs. "Grandma, is my mom coming back?" he asked, with those clear eyes full of innocence and hope. I knelt beside him, stroking his head, and replied softly, "Your mom has gone very far away, son, but I'll always be here, with you." Ethan nodded, although I knew he didn't understand everything yet. I hugged him, feeling his small warmth, like a little flame warming my cold heart. In the afternoon, Mrs. Reynolds came to visit me with a plate of hot cornbread, the aroma filling the small room. "Mary, justice has finally been served," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "I know everything you've been through. I'm very proud of you." I smiled, for the first time in days, feeling a little relief. "Thank you, Reynolds," I replied. "Without you, I don't know how I would have managed." When she left, I went out to the backyard, where the cactus plant that had withered from Sarah's poison tea now had a green sprout. I watered it, listening to the murmur of the wind through the leaves, feeling as if nature were comforting me. I looked at the sky, where white clouds floated slowly, and whispered, "My son, I did it. You can rest in peace now." Tears rolled down my cheeks, but this time they didn't weigh like before. They were tears of liberation, from a mother who had fought until the end to protect what was most valuable. A week after the hearing, I received a summons to appear at the local county courthouse in downtown Cleveland to hear the preliminary sentence. That morning, the sky was gray, with heavy clouds moving slowly, as if carrying the melancholy of the entire city. The cold wind blew, bringing the aroma of coffee from a small stand on the corner, where workers chatted animatedly. I walked with heavy steps, each one taking me back to the painful days I had just lived. The old jacket didn't warm me, but I didn't care. Inside, I just wanted everything to end, so I could start over, even a little. The courthouse was still as cold as the last time, with white painted walls and rows of wooden benches, aligned with precision. The air was impregnated with the smell of old papers, mixed with a slight aroma of cold coffee from the machine in the corner. I sat in the witness stand, my hands clutching the cloth bag where I kept the photo of Andrew and Ethan, the only reminder of the reason why I was still there. The room was full of people, from court employees to some curious neighbors who wanted to witness the outcome of the case that had shocked the entire neighborhood. In the front, Sarah Miller was bowed, her hands cuffed, her black hair plastered to her face, and her face pale, without a drop of makeup. There was no trace left of the proud woman who once entered my house with a radiant smile, who took Andrew's hand and promised to stay by his side forever. Next to her was Gabriel Sterling, in his gray prison uniform, with dark circles, his gaze empty, as if he had accepted his fate. Seeing them, I didn't feel satisfaction, only a deep sadness, as if I were witnessing the collapse of a part of my memories that I once cherished. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a severe gaze, stood up, and her firm voice resonated throughout the room. The defendant, Sarah Miller, 18 years in prison for attempted murder and fraud. The defendant, Gabriel Sterling, 22 years in prison for complicity, forgery of documents, and intentional arson. Every word of hers sounded like a hammer blow hitting the air, leaving the room in absolute silence. Sarah broke down, her shoulders shaking, a choked sob escaping her throat. Gabriel only lowered his head without saying a word, as if all his strength had abandoned him. I stood up and walked slowly to the barrier that separated the witnesses from the defendants. Sarah looked up. Her tired eyes were full of bitterness and despair. "Mrs. Mary," she murmured in a broken voice, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No," I said coldly, though without rage. "You had the opportunity to choose another path, Sarah, but you chose this one." She lowered her head, and tears fell onto the cold floor. But I no longer felt anything, only an icy emptiness inside me. I turned away, not wanting to look anymore at those eyes, the same ones that once made me believe she was part of my family. That afternoon, I took Ethan to the cemetery to visit Andrew's grave. The path was silent. Only the crunching of dry leaves under our feet could be heard. My son's grave was under a rose bush, and the pink petals fell softly onto the tombstone, like a fragile blanket protecting him. Ethan left a bouquet of white daisies. The small flowers trembled in the wind. The boy looked up and asked innocently, "Grandma, does Dad know what happened with Mom?" I knelt beside him, stroking his head, and replied softly, "Your dad knows everything, but up there, there's no room for grudges anymore." Ethan nodded, although I knew he still didn't fully understand my words. I lit a candle, and the flame flickered in the gusts of the evening wind, like a whisper from beyond. At that moment, I thought I heard Andrew's voice, warm and close, a voice I hadn't heard in so long. "Mom, you did the right thing." Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I smiled, feeling that a part of the weight in my heart had lightened. I took Ethan's hand, and we stayed there for a long time, letting the memories of my son return, no longer overshadowed by Sarah's betrayal. On the way back home, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, while the wind played with his messy hair. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, seeing his innocent face, the only fragment remaining of the love I once shared with Andrew. That boy was my reason to fight, the little light in the midst of the darkness that had surrounded us. I drove slowly, letting the sound of the engine mix with the wind like a soft lullaby. When I arrived home, I saw Mrs. Reynolds waiting at the door with a basket of freshly made cornbread in her hands. The warm aroma filled the air, making the small house feel cozier. "I heard, Mary," she said, with a look full of joy. "Thank goodness, justice was served. Now you need to rest." I smiled and invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table, drinking coffee while listening to the radio. The announcer's voice resonated, grave and clear. The Cleveland police dismantled a large-scale insurance fraud ring, led by Gabriel Sterling. Reynolds looked at me proudly and said, "Thanks to your case, they managed to uncover the whole network. You didn't just save yourself, Mary. You saved many more people." I was silent, looking at the backyard through the window. The sky was tinged with golden tones at sunset, and the last rays of sun shone on the old brick fence, like a reminder that light always remains, even after the darkness. Ethan came running out, a drawing made with crayons in his hand. "Grandma, I drew Dad and Grandpa in heaven," he said, his eyes bright. I took the paper and observed the clumsy strokes, two smiling men among white clouds holding shining stars. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I smiled. "It's beautiful, honey, but our heaven is here, right here." I pointed to the small house, the yard, and Ethan himself, all that I had fought to keep. That night, I sat down at the desk and opened the old notebook where I kept the letter, "In case I die." Those few words were now a reminder of everything I had overcome. I didn't burn it, I simply folded it and put it in the back of the drawer, like someone keeping a painful part of the past. Turning off the light, I listened to the soft patter of the rain on the roof. That sound that once made me afraid now brought me a strange peace. I lay down thinking about the price of justice. It never brings joy, nor does it heal the wounds left by betrayal. It is a liberation, yes, but also a bitter reminder. Trust, once broken, is never the same. But as I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's smile, his drawing, and the green sprouts in the cactus pot. And I knew that, despite all that was lost, I still had a reason to keep living, to keep going. After all I've been through, I understood that justice doesn't always come from the courts or the police. It's born from the courage of each person. When we face fear, look betrayal in the face, and don't let evil win, that's when true justice emerges. I learned that trust can be broken, but the truth can never be buried forever. Life taught me that sometimes, to protect those we love, we must sacrifice our own peace. But as long as we keep a clean heart and faith in what is right, even if darkness surrounds us, the light of truth will always show us the way. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and locations to protect the identity of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own home? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you keep silent to maintain the peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that illuminates the path of others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Now, on the final screen, I will leave two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for joining me until this moment.